Hello. We are continuing on with our study in the Gospels, and here Jesus is about to start his second preaching tour. Early the next morning, Jesus went off alone to pray. He sought a time of solitude, a time away from the crowds, yet a time with the Father to prepare for the next phase of his ministry. And this is in Mark chapter 1, verse 35, and Luke chapter 4, verse 42. And when the apostles found him, he informed them that he would not remain in Capernaum, but was going to be moving on and going to other cities, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. And that is Luke chapter 4, verse 43, and Mark chapter 1, verse 38. Because of this second preaching tour, Jesus' reputation spread even further. Quote, "And the report of him went forth into all Syria." Matthew chapter 4, verse 24. The term Syria refers to the larger Roman district of that name, which included the land of Israel. The more reports of his ministry spread, the more people flocked to him. The more people flocked to him, the more miracles he performed. Matthew lists these miracles: sicknesses, diseases, torments, demonization, epilepsy, and paralysis. All of this was further authentication of Jesus' messiahship. Matthew added, quote, "And there followed him great multitudes from Galilee and Decapolis and Jerusalem and Judea and beyond the Jordan." That's Matthew 4:25. By now his reputation had spread to both sides of the Jordan River. The term Decapolis refers to a union of 10 Greek cities, 9 of which were in the Transjordan area. All 10 cities of the Decapolis had Jewish minority populations. Furthermore, in the vicinity of these cities, there were several Jewish villages. A third of these communities were urban in character, and Jesus' reputation again spread quickly among the Jews dwelling in Decapolis. Even Gentiles heard about him, with the result that many began following him. Therefore, it is simply not true that he was merely a local rabbi or a miracle worker who was not very well known. Messiah's authority over nature. This section now opens with Jesus teaching from a boat. Because of the masses had pressed upon him, Luke 5:1, the location was the Sea of Galilee. Quote, "And he sat down and taught the multitudes." Luke 5:3. At this time, Peter and Andrew and John were again called to follow Jesus, and this time into full-time discipleship. James, the brother of John, was added, then Philip and Nathanael, so there were 6. And after the first tour, the 6 would become 12, and we will talk about that as that happens. After teaching the masses from the boat, Jesus told his disciples, quote, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." Luke 5:4. This was contrary to the experience of these professional fishermen. And Peter responded, "Master, we've toiled all night, took nothing." That's Luke 5:5. The implication that Peter was making is that he knew more about fishing than Jesus, since he was the fisherman and Jesus was the carpenter. From Peter's experience, putting out the nets after dawn would be a waste of time. If they could not catch any fish at night, it was even less likely they would catch anything in the heat of the day. Once the sun hits the water, the fish swim deeper into the sea, too deep for the nets of that day to catch them. Nevertheless, after stating his objection, Peter obeyed. Quote, "But at your word I will let them down, the nets down," in other words. Note that in this instance, obedience came before the experience. That's Luke 5:5. Contrary to Peter's expectation, they caught a large multitude of fish, so many that the nets began to tear, and they had to call for others to help. And both boats were so full that they were actually beginning to sink. They estimate that meant about 1 ton of fish, which was a 2-week total catch. At once, Peter recognized the Messiah's authority over nature itself, and he responded, quote, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." That's Luke 5, verse 8. The others were equally amazed, as Luke 5, verses 9 to 10 say. Although they were experienced fishermen, they had never before seen anything like this. In the daytime, the fish would see the nets, by the way, and avoid them. The miracle was that the fish swam blindly into the net. This particular type of fishing that they did, the fish usually had to be scared into the nets after the nets were put in place. Although possible, looking at Luke's account, that whether the fishermen made a commotion or not, it doesn't say. But anyway, they recognized the uniqueness of the Messianic person. They could then see themselves for what they were, sinners. If we compare ourselves with others, we might come out looking pretty well, for there is always someone worse than we are. But when we compare ourselves with the one absolute standard, the God-man, the Messiah, Jesus, when we compare ourselves with him, our conclusion would be the same as Peter's. Lord, we're sinful. But in spite of that, he calls us his own and forgives us. In response to Peter's statement, Jesus did not depart from them, but instead he called them to leave what they were doing and follow him. This was a call to full-time discipleship. Quote, Jesus said, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." That's Luke 5, verse 10. And indeed, they left all and followed him. Luke 5:11. The result of this call was that Peter and the others left their fishing business. That's in Matthew 4, verse 20, verse 22 of Matthew 4, Mark 1, 18, and verse 20. Following Jesus meant a total commitment to full-time ministry. It also meant trusting him to provide for their needs because they had left their main source of income. The next story is about the Messiah's authority over defilement, the healing of the Jewish leper, the first leper. Now, leprosy, we call that Hansen's disease. Now, in the Mosaic law, the issue of leprosy received a very special treatment. The key Hebrew word Moses used for leprosy is zarat, which literally means a mark or a stroke, stroke. The basic meaning of zarat is an infectious skin disease in a general term. It's a generic term that is used to describe all sorts of skin diseases of humans, but it also applies to mildew on fabrics and mildew on stone walls. The leprosy mentioned in the Gospels would refer to Hansen's disease, which is caused by a bacterial infection. And that is it's a progressive skin condition, bacterial infection, which eats away at their skin and tissues and would cause somebody to die in about 10 years. So it's fairly, of course, it was horrific. Consequences for the leper. Well, in the Mosaic law, only a priest had the authority to declare a person a leper. That's in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. And each of those chapters have over 50 verses of details about it. When he did, the leper had to tear his clothing. So as soon as he was declared a leper, he had to tear his clothing and walk around in torn garments for the rest of his life to distinguish himself from others. Torn garments are a sign of mourning. The leper was considered as being dead. He was to allow his hair to grow, go unkept, and had to keep his face covered from the nose down. While traveling, he had to warn anyone approaching him with the words, "Unclean, unclean." Anyone touching a leper would himself become ritually and ceremonially unclean. Lepers have a lifetime of uncleanness. During the wilderness wanderings of Israel, they were not allowed to enter the camp. And later, when the Jews settled into the land, they were ostracized from society, had to live in a section of town designated for them. To be outside the camp meant to be cut off from the covenantal blessings. So lepers were also prohibited from entering the tabernacle or the temple precinct and could not receive any spiritual blessings of the services performed therein. Lepers were accounted as dead, meaning impoverished. The fact that the rabbis correlated leprosy with death implies that healing a leper was to restore him to life, the greatest of all feats, and no Jew was ever healed of leprosy. It's important to understand that from the time of Mosaic law that was actually completed, there is no record in Scripture of a Jew ever being healed of leprosy. While the leadership had all the details about what to do if a Jew was healed of this dreaded disease, they never had a single opportunity to perform these procedures. Furthermore, although rabbinic writings contained cures for many different diseases, leprosy was not mentioned. The feeling among the rabbis was that since leprosy was caused by divine discipline, any Jew who contracted the disease was under divine judgment. Thus, there would be no possibility of a cure. This background explains why the reports of when Jesus healed a leper caused such a great stir among the people of Israel and among the Jewish leadership. The healing of a Jewish leper was unique. Quote, "But he," meaning the healed leper, "went out and began to publish it much and to spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places. And they came to Jesus from every direction," Mark 1:45. By this time, Jesus had already performed many miracles, but the other miracles did not create the stir that this one did. It is noted that Jesus, I just said this, performed many kinds of miracles, but a select few caused a unique reaction among the people and the leadership. And the healing of the leper was the first one of this type for Jesus. The gospel evidences show that there are 3 such types of miracles. Other people such as Moses, Elijah, and Elisha had performed miracles. But none of the miracles they performed caused the people to wonder if any of those men were the Messiah. In fact, often Jesus would cast out the demon in the synagogue. The question raised was not whether he was the Messiah, but by what authority did he do those things? So the biblical evidence does show that there was a category of miracles that anyone would be able to perform if he were empowered by God to do so. And they were not unique to Jesus. The second category of miracles are unique to Jesus. They are unlike any signs that were ever performed in the Hebrew Bible. And these would be called messianic miracles, or miracles performed for the first time in the New Testament by Jesus. As will be shown from the gospel records, whenever Jesus performed a miracle of this second category, the Jewish reactions was radically different from when he performed miracles of the first category. Within the rabbinic frame of reference, and due to the uniqueness of this miracle, the act of healing a Jewish leper automatically meant the healer could be the Messiah. Understanding this will make it easier to grasp exactly why things happened the way they did. Regarding the actual healing of the leper, both Matthew chapter 8 verse 2 and Mark chapter 1 verse 40 mention that the man who came to Jesus was a leper. Luke, however, who was the doctor and was always more detailed about disease and healings, he said, quote, "Behold, a man full of leprosy." That's Luke 5 verse 12. Luke's point was that the leprosy was fully developed and it would not be very long before it would take the man's life. The fact that this leper was already coming to Jesus for healing meant that he already believed in him. Mark 1:40 stated the leper's request, quote, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." He did not ask, "Can you heal me?" or "Can you make me clean?" In other words, he did not doubt Jesus' abilities. The leper believed that Jesus could make him clean if he was so willing. The leper did not say, etc., "You can make me clean if you're willing." The issue was the willingness. Okay, well, unlike other diseases, this one had rendered this man permanently unclean. And yes, it was Jesus' will to heal him. Mark revealed the Messiah's motivation, quote, "and being moved with compassion," in Mark chapter 1, verse 41. Luke described the method of healing, quote, "and Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him," Luke 5:13. All 3 gospel writers took note of the fact that Jesus touched the leper. Even though this was not necessary for the miracle to occur, as the account of the nobleman's son showed us, Jesus could easily heal from afar. And that is in John chapter 4, verse 46 to 50, the healing of the nobleman's son. Why was the emphasis on touching? Well, it was an act of love, a mark of Jesus' compassion for the man. This was the first human hands that touched the leper. Those hands were Jesus' hands, and his touch was sufficient to heal. Jesus then gave him very specific instructions. Quote, "Tell no man, but go your way and show yourself to the priests and offer for your cleansing according to Moses," as Moses commanded, in other words, for a testimony to them, to the Pharisees and the priests. This was going to be a testimony for the priests, the Sadducees and Pharisees. In other words, the Jewish leaders. And that's in Luke 5:14. Jesus told the man not to waste time engaging in conversation, but to go and carry out the procedures described in Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. The process the priest would perform for the cleansing of a leper for a testimony to them. Jesus wanted these leaders to begin taking his message seriously. So Jesus deliberately sent this cleansed leper to the priesthood in order to get the leaders to investigate his ministry and his message. This would force them to make a decision regarding his person, that he was the Messiah, and his message was that he was offering to Israel the kingdom predicted by the Jewish prophets. So on that day, the man appeared before the leadership and he said, "I was a leper. I have been healed of my leprosy." And the priest would have met him outside the temple compound, and the priest would begin the procedure. And upon inspecting him, they would that first day, sacrifice 2 birds. And for the next 7 days, they again, outside the camp, they investigated the man carefully, and they were going to find answers to 3 basic questions. 1, had he really been a declared leper? 2, was he really healed of his disease? And 3, what were the circumstances of the healing? Since only a priest could have declared a Jewish man a leper, there would have been a record of it in the temple. This was an answer to the question number 1, that he was a declared leper. The 7-day inspection would prove that he had indeed been healed of the disease, and that's an answer to question number 2. The investigation of the healing finally would have revealed that a man named Jesus of Nazareth was the one who had healed the leper, shedding light on question number 3. In other words, the first recorded healing of a Jewish leper could not be ignored. A unique miracle had taken place. As a result of this, the report of Jesus began to spread abroad even further in Luke 5:15. Consequently, Jesus again could no more openly enter into a city. No previous miracle caused the stir this one had. Jesus had done something never done before, and the Jewish response was unique. It was known that something very significant was happening in Israel. And also, this was the crucial point of his public ministry. After this, Jesus withdrew to the desert for a time of prayer. And that's Luke verses 5:16. He was praying for what was about to happen next. And I'm going to stop right there and we'll continue on with the next section. Thank you. Have a great day.